barricade at Socka?
As of right now, none.
It depends. We're not in front of him, so the number is still 0.
Well, that's
Exactly.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, what's the matter? Am I in the wrong skin tone, Socka?
Yeah. That's pretty much what it is. It's the mustache. Too much respect for it.
I changed my mind. I don't want to do this anymore.
Socka, I honestly want to have I honestly want to set a debate up with you, Socka. I want to set up a debate with you about something that nonsensical, but we're both extremely serious about.
Okay.
The mustache. I think we've got it. It's the handlebar mustache. Whose is better, more majestic, and more? I think we can go with that. Yes. I'll moderate.
So, okay. Hey, everybody.
I don't know if you guys have ever seen handlebar push-ups before.
Ooh.
Oh my God, we're off the rails already. We're going to talk about productive conversations, everybody. Good start.
What channel did you think you walked into, Shannon? What do you think?
I'm not sure if you guys know this.
Whether or not we can get into that, it all depends on whether or not Shannon goes and has seconds on that drink.
It's Walmart Great Value Diet Coke. Don't get too excited.
Hey, Soccer, are we live?
Oh, we've been live for like 4 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Hi, everybody.
John didn't know. Yeah, wait till you. Yeah, that's all right. I have the same problem.
Okay. So welcome to the discussion tonight. This is a good one because this will be. This is actually going to be my officially, I guess, the last Hangouts on Air for me because the Hangout on Air thing or the Google Hangouts thing is going away August 1st. So if I want to do any more discussions after this, I got to learn how to use Zoom or OBS or Skype or something like that. So this is it's kind of a sad one. I've been using Google Hangouts for a long time, but this is end. But this is a good one. It's a good special one to end off on here. The topic for tonight is I wanted to discuss counter apologetics because it was just something that it's always been kind of in the back of my mind, something I've been kind of thinking about. But it was the other day. I was in a hangout there with Jim Majors and a few other people. 1 second.
Oh.
It's the baby socks.
Wow. There we go. You know what? My wife took 2 out of 3, so I only had 1 here. I thought it'd be easy to manage. So we were having this discussion with Jim Majors, and Skylout was there as well. And it was interesting because, like a drop of a hat, it switches from my usual kind of asshole aggressiveness to Jim just asking him like about a bunch of questions related to kind of like a biblical criticism, and at the end it's like the same goal. Like there's the counter apologist covers like a huge range of different categories and styles that people have, and I was wondering somebody like Skylout in that example there was the way that Jim approaching it better than the way that I was. In some cases maybe, some cases would that style work in everybody, and so I was just kind of thinking about that, about how we approach these discussions, like our own kind of goals, the merits and flaws to our own different kind of styles that we do have, and if there is a way that when we can say that is a good style to approaching these conversations, or are they all good? Just you have to find the right recipient to them. So that was kind of like the origin of this, and so I went out and I talked to you guys because I think this covers pretty much a pretty wide range of different styles and how we approach this. I'm just going to start off. Let's have the panel introduce themselves, and not just like who you are on your channel and stuff, but maybe a few quick words about how it is that you like to approach these discussions when it comes to the topic of counter apologetics. So I'll start with Jim.
Hey everybody, I'm Jim Majors. I am the disciple of Kairos. I do biblical criticism. I do debates. And as far as counter apologetics, I approach it kind of in a mixed martial arts kind of way. It's kind of a half of like a street epistemology, and another half would be biblical criticism, because I believe that whenever you're countering apologetics in a debate, it is best to work within their framework if you can, because it's very easy for them to just dismiss anything that you have to say outside of that framework. So as long as you can operate inside of those parameters that they already have set up, well, that's one less thing for them to bitch about. And so they can't say that you're not seeing it from their perspective, or at least attempting to see it from their perspective. And if you know a good bit about the Bible, then that's what I highly suggest you do, is approach it from a biblically critical side.
Okay, Shannon.
So I'm Shannon Q, and I have a channel called Shannon Q, and the channel banner says engaging in complex conversations. So one of the things that I do is I seek out people who are diametrically opposed to my perspective, or have opinions that are difficult to engage with, not just on my channel, but out in the YouTube sphere in general and the Twitter sphere. And I look to kind of prove that those conversations don't always have to be as contentious. And I guess if you want to talk about my goals aren't necessarily to prove I'm right and somebody's wrong, or not even necessarily to change somebody's mind. I like to try to understand how people come to the perspectives that they have, and try to attempt to bring them into a space where they're less defensive, so that they're more open to attempting to understand how I come to my perspective as well. And I find once people admit that they can at least see how I come to my perspective, because they realize that I'm willing to do the same work and understand how they come to theirs, there's a lot more open lines of communication, and that's how people can come to change their minds and look more towards how they come to the ideas that they hold, and whether or not they have dissonance in them, and things like that. So I have a less academic analytical approach. I'm not an expert in biblical or textual criticism by any stretch of the imagination. I did study psychology and perceptual cognition and communication theory. So my passion is conversations, more so just proving that the average layperson can have better and more productive dialogues.
Okay, and Mr. Nick Soutter.
My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter. I am the owner and operator of the Humanist Codex. We used to be the Atheist Codex, but a lot of people had difficulty because I did try to sort of moderate a lot of conversations, and I got a lot of pushback as the Atheist Codex become the Humanist Codex, and all of a sudden everyone's okay with that. I am a fierce anti-theist, but I do think that it has to operate within certain parameters, and I think, frankly, losing your religion is extraordinarily painful for most people. I think if you've been raised in a completely secular environment, you may not understand how or why, or if you were never really attached to it. But if you were religious, you were immortal in a sense or another. You would see your family again. You would have all these things. And I think it's very difficult to lose that without a tremendous amount of pain that can last really quite a long time. So I think I try to connect with whoever it is I'm speaking with. I try to understand how and why they hold what they hold, and to realize that I'm trying to dislodge a belief that is extraordinarily important to them. And maybe in some cases I shouldn't dislodge for any number of reasons. But for the most part, as an anti-theist, especially if I'm engaged, I try not to really go out after people who aren't ready yet. I try to find a way to meet them halfway. I am against sort of a lot of the more bullying tactics. Humiliation is one that I'm told works great. I think it works great with dictators. I think it works great with strongmen. I think with the average person, that entrenches people much more into their positions. So if you really want to work as an anti-theist, you have to do it from a place of compassion, understanding, and it is almost in some ways a collaboration, even if you believe two different things. And since they're trying to convert you, yeah, it's the same thing.
All right, thanks. Also joining us tonight is John Peterson. He's going to be kind of monitoring the chat for us. I try to keep this as interactive with the viewing audience as possible. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to tag John Peterson. He's still on his John Peterson account, but people make sure you go check out his new account as well, the Amateur Conversationalist, which he's going to be kicking off here shortly.
I'll tell you what, and Socka has agreed to be episode number 1.
I have?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. You know I'm going out of town for a month on Monday, right?
Right, I realize that.
Okay, cool. Although I do appreciate it, I will definitely be on your channel because I think any platform that encourages just discussion and conversation is a great one. So we're kind of like breaking this out here, like with the different styles, and I agree with Jim. I've always thought of myself as like never really as an academic. I'm a layman on a lot of these topics as well, but I love engaging in these conversations, and I love the analysis of the like the MMA fighter. I've always thought of as like within this little corner of the internet that this is like the you have the Coliseums out there where you have Ken Ham going up against Bill Nye, or you have like a lot of these discussions with like Matt Dillahunty and Aaron Raw, and if you go back 10, 15 years with like the original kind of like Four Horsemen, like the huge public events that draw a lot of people to, and that's like the gladiator sports, like that's the big league. And this is like, if this was like to continue on with like the whole kind of Roman gladiator example, like if you guys seen Spartacus, this is like that dirty little pit fight that where people are just clawing at each other and whatever. But like, yeah, it's the amateurs, like well, at least in the way that I approach it. And I always like that. I've never been like huge on like putting together a lot of content. I like trying to amass like a huge following. I did have a show called Deeper Than Dogma once, which we got to just a little over about 500 subscribers, and it was similar to this, just small panel, conversations, focused topics, and I enjoyed that. But yeah, I like these discussions now. Like, and I always have, and I want to try to do more of them. But so getting into this now, like, yeah, like I agree with Jim. The way that I've always approached it is that Street Fighter-esque, fighter style. You go into these rooms and it's very combative with a lot of people. And this brings up a point that Nick brings up here too, is that is that even productive? Does this, because you challenge somebody hard enough like this, it does lead to that entrenchment effect where people just kind of, you end up just reinforcing the beliefs that these people already have. So assuming that should you not really be focusing on the person you're having the discussion with or with the audience when it comes to a venue like this, or should your goals always be focused on the person that you're talking to and trying to understand what their position is and change their mind? Like, what's more important, do you think?
I think that is.
I think out of respect for the conversation, your interlocutor comes first always.
In the conversation, for sure. But I think that when you enter any conversation, you should figure out what your individual goals are first.
Right.
So and always attempt to align your actions and behaviors up with what those goals are. And I don't think that anybody should presume to think that there is such a thing as a right goal in these sorts of circumstances. If your goal is to challenge yourself and hone your skills, that's an admirable goal. If your goal is to compel people to self-analyze, that's an admirable goal. If your goal is to encourage people to better understand the perspective of another, or understand your own perspective, that's an admirable goal. And the list can go on and on and on. Those are all admirable goals, but they all involve a different course of action and dialectic in order for them to be achieved successfully. So I think the first step would be determining what your individual goal is. And once you do that, there's a myriad of tactics that could achieve that goal depending on who your interlocutor is. I agree with Jim that you should always respect the person that you're in a dialogue with. Absolutely, because they've taken the time to give you the respect of speaking with you. I mean, there's lines, of course, like if they start just, throwing explicatives at you and calling you an asshole, you don't have to smile in their face, but But if they have really shitty ideas that you don't, I try to be respectful. Some people aren't shaken. Some people need to be shaken out of it, though. Like, I know people that listen to my conversations and they think, why aren't you going harder at them? I wanted to see you go harder. Like, I wanted to see you press this point. If they had seen somebody with a different tactic than me, but the same goals, employ a different strategy, that may have been more effective for them than my strategy. So I find it difficult to determine or even make an assessment as to whether or not there's a right strategy, regardless of the goal, if that makes sense.
And I think the MMA example plays in well there, and especially if you have more than one type of strategy to draw from and can change midstream and adapt. I do think also as to the question of audience, that's an interesting one, because I hear all the time where somebody is engaged in a conversation, but they're bullying the person, they're humiliating the person. And, I say, well, wait a minute, what precisely do you think this is going to accomplish with the person you're engaging with? And they say, nothing, I'm aware of nothing. But other people see just how stupid he is and how humiliating this is, and they don't want to be like him, and so they're going to deconvert, is presumably the argument. That may or may not work in some cases. I think that's the ends justify the means kind of, well, I'm beating the living daylights out of a person in public, so presumably I'm accomplishing whatever the goal is. And I while I am an anti-theist, I do think, okay, global warming, if you want to see who's opposing global warming, which is the greatest single threat to the species in history, if you want to see who's opposing it, correlates most with level of religiosity. Great. That is one of the reasons why I take this so seriously. But the fact of the matter is, if Thanos snapped his fingers tomorrow and all the religious people went away, you'd still have a lot of people opposing global warming. Religiosity does not cause irrational behavior. So to think that it's worth destroying, and on Twitter, you have to have a thick skin anyway, but to think that the ends always justify the means because, hey, maybe I'm deconverting people in a hypothetical universe to an audience that I don't know whether or not they're watching, I think is actually immoral. And I do think you need to consider your audience. You need to consider the effect of it. But I think in particular what Jim said, it may be a little old fashioned to sit here and say that the person you're talking to comes first. But for the most part, not only is I think that's sort of the right way to approach it, but I think pays off the greatest dividends in the long run.
Well, because the people that are watching you may be putting that the person that you're interacting with may be a proxy for them in that situation. They may be seeing them as representative of themselves. So if they see that person being disrespected or cut off or ad hommed into oblivion, then they're not as likely to respect your perspective because they see you as hostile instead of as making good points, and their emotions are going to take over. Like people don't realize how often their emotions take over their rational processes, the rational faculties. And if you see somebody that's your proxy being eviscerated, but not eviscerated, like not their ideas eviscerated, them personally being eviscerated and humiliated, you're going to have a negative affect towards the person that's engaging with them and be less likely to say, oh, maybe I should really critically analyze the things that they're saying.
Or if you're on the fence already, let's say somebody's on the fence and they see the engagement and they say, I'm not sure if there's a God or not, but I kind of rather there's one. And if the other side is filled with these kinds of fucking assholes, I'm gonna stay with my belief. I'm never gonna talk to another atheist again. And unless you do a study with how many people are converting versus deconverting, I find it very difficult to take seriously the people who say, well, I may reach somebody in the audience. Yeah, and you may reach them and get them off the fence and on the other side.
Can I interject real quick from the chat? Drag wanted me to remind Socka of Ozzy's dictum that we all get the conversations that we deserve.
Oh, I love Ozzy.
Ozzy Ram. Oh, yeah. Ozzy's awesome.
Yeah, no, that is a good point. I mean, we do get the conversations that we deserve, especially which is why I'm glad that I got this one. I feel like this is beyond what I deserve, but that's great. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
But I understand what you're saying about the approaches here. But you take an example like the Bill Nye Ken Ham debate. where you have an option to debate somebody like Ken Ham, who's appealing to the losing side of an argument, like demonstrably so, and Bill Nye didn't go after him hard, at all. But still clearly won that debate. I think a lot of the people that they did the poll, and I think that even a lot of the people that were supportive of Ken Ham recognize how poorly he did in that discussion. But when they engage in this, there was no hope of changing Ken Ham's mind. That this was for the audience, and even if you do approach it with the soft hand approach, it was more effective, to address it almost to the audience rather than his interlocutor in that case. Why wouldn't that translate to the smaller scale as well? I mean, as long as
they're both aware it's going to the audience. In that case, both are aware it's going to the audience. If you're on Twitter, on social media, on Facebook, one side may be thinking, I'm talking with you personally, while the other side says, I really don't care as long as I make you look bad, and that helps my point with the audience. So with a formal debate, everybody's agreed before they go in and knows what the rules are. The situation that we're describing is one person is having an honest discussion, the other one's not.
No, I mean, but there is always this imbalance, though, within the discussions themselves. I've always kind of said that when I'm engaged in these conversations, it almost seems unfair, because whoever I'm talking to is they have a goal. Their goal is to convert me, change my mind, or just shut my mouth, depending on who it is. But then I approach it, and there are some discussions I get into, I'm literally in it for the sport. When you have these two completely, different views when you're approaching these discussions, could you actually expect an honest discourse between the people, or in that way?
Well, sure, but regardless, you also have to take into account at that point, if you've lost all hope in your interlocutor, you still have to take into account any potential audience that you have. And I think first and foremost, it's important that as a representative of the atheist community, usually in these debates, I am representing the atheist worldview. It's really important for us to maintain our humility and to be a representative. It's being polite as much as possible. Now, people have seen me fly off the handles at people who were just rude and who are asking for it, essentially. But I always try to like people. The same thing that Shannon said. People get upset at me because in my debates I don't hold people to the fire enough. I don't hold their feet to the fire, because much like mixed martial arts. If I can't get them in a certain hold, and I think that I have there's a potential vulnerability somewhere else, I will shift my position and get a different perspective on it and get a different hold and just leave that alone, because I'm going to leave that for something better, something easier, something that I don't have to work so hard for.
And you also have to even if you go guerrilla style, right? Even if you are, like you said, you're in it for the sport. If you're in it for the sport, then theoretically people are watching it for entertainment. And look at somebody like me. I am not a subject matter on anything biblical or anything from a biology perspective or a geology perspective. But because the subject matter is interesting to me, I watch a lot of those, sport type debates. Sometimes they get me incredibly frustrated because people are talking over each other, or I feel like maybe some people are being disrespectful to one another. But I always come away with something in those instances. I've learned a great deal and challenged myself a great deal, because in those conversations, somebody that I did or didn't like on either side has said something that I had previously verified or looked into, that I thought may be something that comes up in a conversation for me in the future, something that was just interesting to me, and it's compelled me to look into it. And I don't think that I'm unique in that position. A lot of people, especially if that little snippet of information that they got while they were watching that for entertainment is something that challenged their views, they may want to look into it solely for the purpose of refuting it and then delve deeper, right? So sometimes through that infuriation, people are compelled to delve further. That's an effect that takes place as well. But that's not necessarily the person that you're engaged with. The person you're engaged with is generally not the person whose mind you're going to change in these situations when you're having these sort of public dialogues, especially with very entrenched people who are very invested in communities, you're not going to get them to go, you know what, I'm switching teams like midstream in a conversation. That's probably not going to happen. So even if you're not respectful, it would be my preference that people were. That's me. Most people don't like that. most people like the sport of it, right? I get that I'm unique in that situation. But there's still something to be gleaned from it for that reason and others.
Well,
go ahead, Nick.
Well, there's another interesting thing too, which I think is a very profound issue in regards to sort of anti-theism, at least on social media, and even in debates. And people ask me all the time, they're like, okay, well, how many people have you deconverted? It really depends on how you define deconverted. Present, when they said, you know what, I think maybe I don't have any faith, 5 or 6. And when I was engaged in that, I wasn't responsible for any of them. They were 95% of the way deconverted by the time I met them. And the ones who eventually deconvert, I'd like to think I had a hand in moving them down that road. But there was no one. I have never had a conversation with an entrenched theist where by the end of it, they're like, holy shit, you're right. How did I not say? And then boom, they switch. That's not what, but that seems to be the goal. Everybody sees that as the goal. That is virtually, if not completely and utterly impossible. What you can do is move them down just a bit and get them thinking about things in a way that they haven't thought about, and appeal to the, don't you think it's important to know? Don't you think it's important to question? Then the next guy hopefully treats them with dignity and respect and gets that ball moving further down the field. Every time they encounter somebody who treats them horribly, the ball goes back in the other direction. So it's a team effort, even if not everybody knows you're on the team. But this idea that you're going to end it in one conversation is pervasive, and it's ludicrous.
See, I like that because it's I think like very early on into the community, I came into contact with like the presuppositional apologists, which are, you know, which was a great experience. Because they were addressing. I didn't really understand like a lot of like the philosophical problems that that we do face on a day-to-day basis. Nobody really does a lot of thought of this. We accept so many things just pragmatically that we just don't even worry about this stuff. And so when you get into these discussions and they start presenting these philosophical problems, and you're like, yeah, I got a solution to that. And even to this day, I had a discussion on Dragon's channel the other day with a guy who's been active in, kind of been doing like the online discussion thing for a better part of a decade, who refused to accept that there was a hard problem with solipsism, and
even I know that.
So it was interesting just to have that discussion there, but. So I guess like a lot of like I don't want to say like aggression, but like where it became like I said, like a challenge to me, where that I appreciated was with the presuppositionalists, because they're coming out there and they're lying. They're straight up lying. When they assert things like that, like the atheist worldview is internally contradictory, or that it's self-refuting, or any of the the bumper sticker philosophy arguments that they kind of put out there, and so like a huge kind of like portion like the discussions I've been having has been approaching from this angle. So these people are just repeating back the type of apologetics that they've heard for years, that that they've been lied to, and you just want to correct them. Like it's not even about for me. I'm not even sure if it's about whether or not I actually necessarily want to deconvert people, bring people to my position. I've been an atheist all my life. It doesn't really matter. I don't need other people to join me. This is just how I've been. But when you get into these discussions now, and you just hear really bad arguments, you want to just point it out. You want to be like, okay, well, hold on a second. Like, if your entire view is based on this argument, well, shoot, give me 10 minutes to unpack this with you, and And in the same sense that if I'm putting on an argument that's just really bad, I'd appreciate it if people take me aside too and be like, hold on a second, don't think this is as strong as you think it is.
Do you find it like a lot of them speak past you through this whole endeavor of wading into this sphere? I've discovered a lot about my limitations as somebody who's engaging in conversations. Like, for example, the first time I encountered a flat earther, it was a similar situation. I realized that somebody had said something so ridiculous that I had never even contemplated figuring out how to counter it. Like, I literally didn't know how. I was just like, of course the earth is round. And when somebody said prove it, I was like, I don't even know how. I don't know how. Right. So engaging in these conversations, you find out the limitations of your knowledge and also the limitations of your ability to present things in a compelling way, not just to the person that you're speaking to get through to them, but also, like you said, to the audience. Does anybody else find that? Because that was a huge wake up moment for me when I literally could not prove the earth was round. I had no idea. Like, it confounded me. I was like, I don't even know how to start doing that. How does one go about doing that?
Yeah, you run into a lot of these problems. Like the earth is round one is actually an easy one to fall into, because we put so much faith in it, that it seems something that's just not even on the table of discussion anymore. And because we remove it from the table for discussion, nobody is prepared to defend it. And that's not just a problem with with a lot of topics in philosophy or science. It's just a problem all the way around, where I think that a lot of people are ill prepared to defend even some of the simplest concepts because of that exact reason, and it doesn't do us any good when that happens.
But it's great, because then you can go study it and you can go learn it and you can figure it out. I think, Shannon, the first time you and I were in a stream was actually the Ask a Philosopher with Ozzy and that was for the presuppositionalist.
And I was so sick.
Oh, that's right. You were not. Well, you just wanted out of there. You were like, okay, tell me one more thing, and then I gotta go.
It was valuable, though.
Hume's problem of induction. That was it. But one of the interesting, we were talking about presuppositionalists and them talking past you. And I think one of the things is that's why Romans 1:19 is so utterly important for them. Is that's the warrant they have to do that, so they can say, look, you do believe in God. The presuppositions I am making, including that the Bible is inerrant, this allows me to already declare where I can put you, a position from which you cannot move, and then they actually are empowered to talk past you. And it's sort of like, I understand you believe these things, but obviously you have to, believe these things because you've been seduced, and in fact the reality is opposite, and you are incapable of understanding it. So I am right by fiat. And that's one of the things I'm not a fan of about the presup. I haven't debated. I've had a couple offers, but I haven't debated a presup yet. So we'll see. But it's a bugger.
I've done it quite a few times. I once locked my. It was funny. I was in an off-air hangout once with 5 or 6 presuppers, and people just always say, "Well, poor you," and I'm just like, no. It reminds me of the scene from The Watchmen, where what's his face? One of the guys gets locked up in prison there.
You're Rorschach.
Rorschach. Yeah. It's like no. You guys are locked in here with me. So
I haven't had a formal debate. Sci 10 has once or twice sort of mentioned it, and we haven't.
I debated Sci 10 for 5.5 hours.
Whoa!
Yeah.
Holy smoke!
you've brought it up before.
Was it a formal debate, or was that just like?
Yeah, it's on non-sec. It was on the show, and then we went into the after show, and like it was supposed to be like an after show, right? It went right into picking up the debate where we left off, and we fucking debated for like another 3 hours.
Wow.
So one of the points that Nick just brought up, though, which I find interesting, because this leads into like Jim's kind of specialty here, is that he does you do a lot of like textual criticism, a lot of biblical criticism, when you approach these conversations, and like how does that work when you go into a room with somebody and like you're discussing something like Romans 1?
Well, so the thing is, I do know the rules, and the rules are these texts are authoritative. And first and foremost, if you can debunk these texts, if you can prove that what they're trying to use these texts to justify is not saying that, or is meant a different way, then you jump on that. That is the jugular. That's simple. That kills it, because that is the source of their authority.
I imagine that's a lot harder to do than easier said than done.
I know that.
Sure.
That's what I'm trying to get at. Like,
and then even whenever you do it, they fishtail out of it, and they're like, "You don't understand. You're an atheist. You can't interpret the Bible because you're not a Christian," or whatever. Whatever the argument is. It's usually the precept. That's Sciatin's favorite.
Yeah. But already believe in God. Romans 1:20.
But what's great about that, though, is again, consider your audience. Like, they just saw that. They're looking in their Bibles and they're going, "Holy fuck, he's right."
Yeah.
That's true.
So I want to interject real quick, and I don't know if I'm being trolled here, but Drag wants Socka to explain why he got ran off of forbidden fruit. What does that mean?
So, okay. So one of the things that I've done as well is that maybe this is just me because I'm kind of an ass, I guess, in these conversations. Maybe, I don't know. Is that I have a really bad habit of debating atheists.
Why is that a bad habit?
Well, because I'm always right.
Oh, okay. Because you're a dick. That's why.
Well, at least you're honest about it.
Yeah.
I'm infallible.
If I were always right too, I'd be honest about it too.
No, there was a guy named Forbidden Fruit that do you know Richard? Oh shoot, I'm trying to remember what the guy's name was. He was I think he was one of the guys that originally founded Free Thought Blogs. And he put out a article called 12 Things Atheists Need to Stop Saying. And
no, I'm sorry. Was that GM Skeptic?
No, this is about 5-6 years ago.
Oh, okay. Well, before that.
Yeah. No, it wasn't Carrier. I know Drag's gonna know. Shoot. No, Richard Carrier, Brad, big guy. Big dude.
He can put it in the live chat and John can pick it up. Okay.
Yeah, Braden or something. Jim Braden, I think it was. Maybe that's what it was. I can't remember. Anyway, so this guy, he kind of jumped into the scene. He was an atheist. He had good videos. I went to a lot of his hangouts, a lot of discussions with him. But he took offense to this idea that that there'd be this list, this authoritative list that in a way where it's just like, well, atheists have to stop saying these 12 things. Ed Braden, that was the guy's name. Thank you. And the problem was that it was like, well, it was a good list. It made sense, but the big point of contention was religion is a mental illness.
Oh, that is not a mental illness.
Right. Yeah. Like that's what Ed Braden
said. By any metric.
Yeah, man. So Ed Braden said that you people have got to stop saying that religion is a mental illness. Yes. And Forbidden Fruit was like adamantly against it.
You wanted to say religion was a mental illness?
Right, yeah. And
just objectively wrong.
Yeah, so we were going over all these points in a live show, and I was challenging him on all the points. I'm just like, well, no, I don't. I agree with Ed with what he's saying, and here's why. We break it down, and this led to a response video to me. A reshooting of the original video without guests, where he went through all the points, and then another video where he tried to show that religion was mental illness. There was like 4 or 5 responses to this, and I just did a full detailed breakdown of everything that like the studies that he was citing, where they were wrong, all this other stuff, and yeah, we weren't that close after that, But it was just a really bad argument,
But you cite a study that showed that there's not necessarily an abnormality, but a slight difference in formations of certain areas of the prefrontal cortex and with people that have higher degrees of religiosity. Because there's a differentiation between the construction of cortical structures in your brain, that doesn't necessarily indicate mental illness. I could literally remove parts of your cortices, and that wouldn't be indicative of or cause a mental illness. Just differentiation in brain structure is maybe a correlate in some instances to mental illness, but it is not indicative of, by virtue of its existence, mental illness. Differences are just differences. That by that metric, you would say females have a higher degree of white matter in their brain, whereas men have a larger amount of gray matter in their brain. White matter is like myelinated axons. Gray matter is the somas, like the cell bodies of the neurons in your brain. So, but just because there's a differentiation, like a clear differentiation that's marked, it's objectively true that there's a differentiation. That doesn't mean that all females have a mental illness, because their brain has a different construction.
Well, and even then, if you could demonstrate that it was, which I agree it's not, and there'd be no way to demonstrate it's not, but even if you could demonstrate that it was, I think it's, as you said, it's by degree, so it may indicate a higher degree, but even people who don't have it may still be religious, and even quite religious. It's a strong correlation, but it's not a one-to-one, if I understand correctly.
It could be a propensity to lead towards mental illnesses because of indoctrination, for example. So if you're in like a cult-like system, like if you're in a system that causes you to suppress emotions, or if you're in a system that causes you to be emotionally or mentally abused, and in many cases, religious systems are the types of systems that constitute that environment, you may have a higher propensity to ultimately end up with a mental illness that's caused by your environmental stressors in having an effect on your your cognitive development. That's definitely the case, but simply being religious is not a mental illness. Like just the average cafeteria Christian who isn't comparable to somebody who's in the Westboro Baptist Church. You know what I mean? Even though
but the potentiality, though, I mean, you also have to look at that. Like, as long as people are ingrained into that and they're passing on to their kids, so it's not just them that's in there, because them being in that church affects a lot more than just them.
Certainly, but it doesn't. Just being religious isn't a mental illness.
Well, no, but the problem is that church, for everything that it provides, it's enabling, if anything, because it gives people a reason to stay with religion. Because hey, this is a convenience store. This is a one-stop shop. You can get everything you need right here.
Well, one of the reasons that I'm an atheist is because I believe that having religious like constructs confounding your cognitive faculties is an issue. So I'm not an anti-theist for, the history reasons that most other people are. It's because everything that has to fit into a box. If it's dissonant to that box, you either have to find a way to misshape that box or throw it away or disregard it, as opposed to somebody who doesn't have that religious scaffolding pre-existing in their cognitive structures is able to just incorporate information freely without having it to fit that predetermined, externally imposed scaffolding for their thought processes. So that I 100% agree with. But if you to jump from that to just ubiquitously saying religion is a mental illness, or religious people are, by virtue of being religious, mentally ill, is a huge misnomer and is just objectively false. And if you start to go down that road, then you're wrong. And wouldn't you rather be right?
Well, it's also just an easy dismissal. Like the same type of thing. Like people will point to studies and say and cite it as evidence that it's true. But I mean, then when a theist would turn around and point to the studies that show like a correlation between autism and atheism, and then it's like, well, atheists are all autistic, and then people go up in arms about that, and they don't realize that people do the same thing on the opposite side, but it doesn't really matter. These are just really easy ways to dismiss somebody else's position. That's all we're doing at this point.
Right.
Well, it's the same as the pre-supper argument. Actually, there's almost no difference. Yours is better about the autism, but yeah.
Hey, from our inquisitor of the evening, Dragnot Silvis.
Because I'm fire.
He wanted to know, was the Ponage era of atheism useful?
Is that over?
What?
What is
the
that?
Ponage. The
Ponage.
Yeah, I would say that it started in the early. Actually, we were talking about this the other day, which is really funny. Is the people that are willing to go into discussion, and I found this, like, I'm not sure if this is because we don't have as easy access to the discussions as we did at one point in time. It's a lot harder for me to find conversations with just open rooms, just talking with theists than it was 4 or 5 years ago, and. Could this be because there's just less people partaking in it? We don't have the same avenue. I don't know. So there was a time where I would call it actually like the edgelord atheists. The people that followed like the original Four Horsemen, like the people that would go around and make the statements like religion's a mental illness. People that would just go out there and just think back to the what was it? The first march there that they did in Washington, D.C. back, I think was it 2015 or 16, where Dawkins gets up on stage and talks about ridicule them, to all theists, that their views deserve to be ridiculed. And people did. People went out afterwards, and in these discussions, that's how they would approach it. They would insult, they would ridicule, they would just belittle, whatever their opponent's beliefs were. And you don't see it as much anymore. You don't see it as much, and I think that there was just that either it's because that style's fallen out. Maybe we just don't have access to the same type of hangouts that we used to, or interactions between people, or all those people just became super edgelord, alt-right wing people, and are now trolling the fucking meme forums somewhere else.
Yeah, so I think it's a good mixture of all of it. I think that, but I think for the most part that, like, for me as a new atheist, I just about threw the Bible in the trash can. Once I realized that it was just it was what it was. I was like, I can't do this, and I just threw the baby out with the bathwater. And I was a mythical Jesus mythicist, and all this other stupid crap. And I think that it was a tendency of Protestants who were leaving Christianity to go to the extreme polarities of atheism. And I ran right into the arms of Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens, and they saved me, and I owe them so much. But I wouldn't want them debating philosophy for me. You know what I mean?
And they're also somewhat misunderstood. Hitchens, in his debate with Al Sharpton, gave I think one of the greatest analogies. Somebody had asked him, why do you think we shouldn't have religion? And he flipped out and he said, I've said this enough. I've said this enough times. You are not to make me play with the toys. If you want to have the toys, people will have these toys as long as they are, afraid of death. People are going to be having these toys, and they're going to play with them, and they're going to invite their friends over to play with them, and you can do that. And I have no problem with that. You are not to make me play with the toys. And look it up. It's marvelous. But what I find interesting is that's not the first time that he has said he doesn't mind if people have their own religious beliefs. And people think that he went out after all religion, and he didn't. He did in his debate with his brother. He made a similar argument. He also made an argument about theism as opposed to deism, and made it clear most of the people that he most beloveds in history were all deists, and he accepts that, and he's happy with that, and he likes deists. It's when they move from that position to the theist position. And I think a lot of these people, now I had never heard that Dawkins had said that, and I think that's awfully troubling if that's what he said. But Dawkins, Sam Harris, a number of these guys are actually profoundly misunderstood. And the people who are most aggressive on Twitter and say, well, I love Hitchens, I was like, I don't think you've actually listened to what Hitchens says in any of these debates or even writes about. He ended the documentary Collusion with Wilson. Wilson asked him, if you could end all religion tomorrow, would you? And he said no. I mean,
I've said no to that button press question before too. If you could press a button and remove all religion, would you? My answer is always no, because my primary goal is to ensure that people are unconstrained by externally imposed ideologies. And if I take the step to externally impose my perspective, then I'm no better than the things that I purport to fighting against. So what would I be doing if not replacing God with me in that scenario and indicating that I know better than everybody else and that they should think like me?
That's why the outlaw religion thing scares the living daylights out of me. The people who sit there and say we should outlaw religion, that scares me. We should not outlaw religion. Excuse me. We'll outlaw atheism next.
We should learn how to be convinced.
Jim actually had an interesting tweet exchange with Modern Day Debate earlier today. Do you want to go into that there for a second, Jim?
You're going to refresh my memory.
The one where we need to beat church.
Oh yeah.
Who was this with?
Yeah,
James.
So I've made this statement quite a few times, and it's gotten me in a lot of hot water. So this time when I tweeted it, I made some clarification. But I've been saying that in order to beat the church, we have to be the church, and by that I mean the church provides people with all of these positive things, and that's why church is still relevant. Is because like I said earlier, it is a one-stop shop. It is a convenience store. They can get everything they need right there, and it's cultural, right? It's iconic, if you will. It's traditional. It's just something that you're supposed to do, right? But there are so many better ways that we can provide charity, and we can help people and provide these extra services and provide a sense of community and belonging and just helping people. I mean, that's what I miss about church the most, and it's really hard to find that in the atheist community. And it makes me sad that the church holds a monopoly on it, and they have their doors locked 5 days out of the week. Most all churches. In an air-conditioned building with the pews empty, and homeless people sleep on the steps in front of the church.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was interesting because I think I was drawing the same kind of conclusion that you were, because he was asking you to clarify, what do you mean by beat the church? And it's just like, well, what do you mean beat the church, become the church? And it was like, for that reason. There's so many cultural aspects to it, that the churches provide. Like I said, like a lot of charity. Like you associate the church in a lot of cases with charity, and because of this, like you said, it's hard to find like atheist groups that do this, because this has to be like ideologically driven, and atheism by itself is not an ideology. There's no unifying banner for this. I was watching Aaron Ra's one of his last videos there, where they're doing their annual protest of the Ark Encounter, and by the way, I love Apologia's interview with Aaron Ra, and what's his name?
Eric. Oh yeah,
Eric.
you had Eric, and I got to listen to that whole thing. It was pretty funny. It was
those guys were hilarious together. That was great.
Yeah.
I feel bad that I forgot his name, but
Eric from Talkeethen from the UCA.
Yeah. But it was an interesting discussion, because when I was listening to the video that Aaron Ra put up there, and you had all these different speakers come out there, and the thing that kind of tied them together was that they didn't believe in a God. Other than that, the views that were expressed by the individual speakers were completely different. You had the woman from Black Atheists up there who was talking about, atheism and people of color. You had, obviously the girl from, that was advocating for education from the school there, and you had Eric up there almost advocating for the Richard Dawkins just ridicule them type of idea. But there is no kind of unifying ideology, so it's really hard to build charity into atheism. And this is one of the biggest problems that we have when we talk with theists, is that they're the ones that lump all these things to the atheism. Well, you have to be a moral nihilist. You have to be a physicalist or materialist. You have to be all these other things, and we deny this. We say, no, the only thing that we need to be is, the only thing we share is that we just don't believe in a God. But the problem is that there's no room for charity in there.
But I think that's just a problem. I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is that we've just become lackadaisical. We've just become complacent and said, oh, well, the church is doing a good enough job. We don't have to step in. But the fact of the matter is like it's an issue. And the church is tax exempt in the United States for a reason. And it's because they're supposed to provide these charitable services to the community. And they're failing on every measure.
Well, and I think while it may not be built into atheism, charity in many ways I think can be thought of to be built into secularism. And the reason I say that is because the secular society. Well, first of all, if you were to look at the top 10 most successful societies in terms of both World Health Organization statistics for life expectancy and UN statistics on happiness index, 9 of them are also in the top. I think it's still the top 10 for most secular societies. And I think what happens is, I think if when people start to look at rational solutions, there was a senator, I forget which senator, who said that global warming is not a problem because God will take care of it. When you think that, this was a U.S. senator, when we think as a culture, as a society, that there is a third party that will bail us out of this, we don't take our own problems seriously. When we can remove that, we start to take our own problems seriously. Now, in Scandinavian countries, the average income tax rate is, if I recall correctly, it's about 50% is roughly the average income tax rate in like Sweden. However, most of that, they also have a 100% literacy rate. They have no homelessness. They have if you become unemployed because your job gets moved somewhere or the economy changes, they have ways of reintegrating you back into the economy. And they end up, first of all, you actually have more money in your pocket, disposable income, than you do in other countries at a much less tax rate. And second of all, the charity problem is almost in essence solved because the solutions to a happy, healthy, sustainable society have presented itself once you stopped once you started thinking that these problems are anybody else's but our own. And so, right. While I think that's kind of that's not the direct answer to, it's not built into atheism, it's not built into secularism per se, but I think what's been discovered is it's in everybody's best interest. Rising tide raises all boats. It's in everybody's best interest to work together. And the countries that have most successfully, irrefutably, according to the data, have done that, have all also been, with one exception, the most secular societies on the planet. I don't think that's a coincidence.
Exactly. We see all the problems with it. Everybody acknowledges the problems, but what do? We take a banner that's big enough to cover it that says mission accomplished, and we cover it up.
Yeah. Are all those societies good at building? Like, they have existing scaffolding too. One thing that I've, again, discovered wading in is that when you initially enter the atheist community, you enter in very, either, angry or wide-eyed, and you're seeking compatriots, you're seeking counterparts, and you tend to sort of start to glom on to people that ostensibly share your goals, and that can snowball. But because there is no set of predetermined enforced regulations, we have no mandate. Our personalities are allowed to have to have free reign. We're all free entirely to instantiate ourselves to the highest degree. When everybody is free to instantiate themselves to the highest degree, people start to realize just how disparate they are. And without something unifying them, they start to, fracture off into more cliquey groups that they can affiliate with, that share their individual goals and common personality traits. That just tends to be the way it seems to work. And as such, atheists cover the gamut. So you're going to find atheists who are just about as far right as you can get, like all the way to, alt-right people. And you're going to find atheists that are just about as far left as you can get, all the way to Antifa, and everywhere in the middle. So when you come in, you can sometimes, because these people are throwing grenades at each other all the time, and people in the middle are throwing grenades at each other all the time, because your ideas are so open and so free, and your personality is allowed to just be unimpinged. It can be hard to find a place to commonly settle and organize towards what is our overall ideal. And our overall ideals, the ones that unify us, seem to be that we all want to be unimpinged. But by virtue of having that happen, we all fracture.
The problem is, with it being so central to our culture, is it's going to affect people in every way, right? I mean, it can cause quite a reaction. Like I do think there's some people who need religion, that they can't have it taken away from them, or they will probably kill somebody,
or themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Or they just won't have any hope. They won't have anything to live for.
But I'm sure there's ways to step out of that, though. Like everything is for a time. So
yeah, I don't know about when you guys deconverted, but I had quite the existential crisis for quite a few months afterwards.
Well, and I have to, and again, I had a debate with Adam Friended, and it was actually sort of a follow up. I had done a debate on do we need religion with S.J. Thomason, and he took a very different view than I did, and he and I ended up having this discussion, and he had brought up some interesting points. I'm not there with him on it, but he had brought up some very interesting points, and one of them, I think, is that is it really reasonable to expect that all of us universally can move away from it? If it's something that does seem to be a part of us, is it, we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses, we all have things that we are good at and things we're not, and things that we just cannot do to save our lives. And isn't it reasonable to suspect that there's going to be at least some percentage of the population for whom walking away from religion is going to be that they will be unable to function without that, which is one reason why I just try to consider, I don't think that's the whole population. I don't think that's even the majority of it. But I try to keep in mind, that's again why I say try to connect with who I'm talking with, because you're playing with fire, you're playing with live ammunition. And if you really do, the very first theist I ever argued with was on Facebook, and he was cute. He sent me a 3-page thesis on why my daughters were going to be in hell because of my atheism. He described to a T like the smell of their burning flesh and all this other stuff. He was a really pleasant guy, but after months of arguing, and I have no idea why I stuck with him that long, he sent me a message and said, "Nick, we have to stop arguing."
Remember our first.
Yeah. Well, I remember this one the most, and maybe this wasn't the first. This I will always remember it as the first. He had said, "Nick, we have to stop arguing." I said, "Okay, why?" But he was the one who came after me. So, but okay, why? And he said, "I have been forsaken by the entire female species." That's how he said it. Okay, I'm not. Yeah, that's what he said. Okay, Shannon, don't come after me for it. That's what he said. He said, "I've been forsaken by the entire female species. I don't have a job. I don't have any friends." And he lived in a trailer in the middle of some Midwest state. He had a pickup truck, and I'd seen pictures of him. And he said, the only reason I don't eat a gun tomorrow, and I've got the gun for it, is because it's a sin to do it, and you are taking that away from me. I stopped. And it was one of the scarier moments of my life, too, because I was like, holy shit, I had no idea. And if he hadn't have said that, and I'd kept going, and I'd woken up the next day and read that he was dead, I don't know how I would have dealt with that. But and that's when I said, okay, A, do I really want to continue with this? And ultimately, of course, I decided yes. That was like 2 or 3 years ago. And then B, okay, I have to have some responsibility for how I engage. Mistakes are going to be made. People are going to be hurt. There's nothing I can do to stop it. I can do my best to mitigate it. That's all I've got. And I think it's worth going forward. But
so in a discussion not too long ago with a friend of mine, he brought up this a really interesting analogy. He started talking about viruses, and viruses are unique, but also uniquely specialized. Like the flu virus, I think it was the flu virus that he was talking about there. It targets like cells in the body, but very specific cells, like the ones on the inside of your nasal there. HIV, again, another virus, but very specialized. It targets very specific cells in the body, and he likened this like a religious belief, not to like a mental illness or a disease or anything like that, but like a virus that has that is able to target the critical thinking ability that people have. That it doesn't say that they lack critical thinking completely. It's just that when it comes to that belief, it's protected. That the beliefs that they can be critical about most aspects of their life, but the virus protects itself against any type of critical thinking about it itself. Now, I always thought that was kind of an interesting approach. That when you get into these discussions and you feel like you're tearing away the faith of somebody, are you really tearing away this important aspect of it, or is it more that you are just you're giving them back that ability to critically analyze the beliefs that they do have, and if they do get it back, is it really going to be that detrimental to them? Today it might seem terrible, but every single person here who is a Christian who's lost their faith is obviously probably feels like they're doing better because of it.
So for me, I had no problem analyzing it, but for me as a Christian, I never had to analyze it. For me, it was like gravity. You don't question gravity; it just works. You drop a ball and it falls to the ground. 100 times out of 100, I'll tell you right now. But then when it starts happening one thing at a time, it's like popcorn. In the microwave, it's just a couple at first, just pop, 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 pop. And then it becomes a chain reaction, and then before you know it, it's just fucking going off, and it no longer resembles what you once saw it as.
I think it also depends on what role it initially plays in your life too when you're deconverting. So if religion is a huge component of your individual identity, as opposed to something you just believe and enact on Sundays every once in a while if you remember to go to church, there's a huge difference, a massive difference. If it's intertwined with aspects that you identify as you, and then all of a sudden aspects of you become a lie, you can go into crisis. You can absolutely go into crisis, which is why I have mental health links included in every single one of my videos, because it's a serious issue, and it's one that people don't really realize is as serious as it is. Like, it can throw you, if you imagine, for example, that you've been a suppressed person for your entire life. You were, like, let's say you were gay, for example, and you were in a really fundamental household, and you went through your life telling yourself that you had to suppress that aspect of yourself because it wasn't even real and it was a sin, and you end up getting married and you end up having kids, and then after you've gone through the motions of building a life that you think that you're supposed to have because you're convinced that there's something wrong with you, you suddenly find out, oh shit, none of that shit's true. I went through all of that up until this point, thinking I was doing the right thing, only to find out everything that I was striving for is wrong, and I have not been myself and have constructed this entire life around this belief system that was never real to begin with. Now what do? I don't believe this anymore. But my circumstances are such that I can't be myself. And I don't even know how to be myself because I've spent so much time suppressing who I am. Like that's an extreme example, but there's other variations of that example. People getting married early because they think that they need to have children. There's people that don't get married, like even going outside of marriage. There's a myriad of examples. It's not just, oh, I don't believe anymore. Now I can continue on my life as I always have been. It's the only difference is I don't believe this thing. There's aspects of your life interwoven in that aren't easily untangled.
I think in this day and age, I had a very unique deconversion experience because I didn't get into the online community until after I'd already deconverted. So I didn't know any other atheists when I became an atheist, when I lost my God belief. And I was like for like the first 6 months. And I was, like I was saying, I had a really bad existential crisis and didn't have anybody to turn to, lived in a small town, knew there was no atheist in my town that I knew of, had never met an atheist in my life. Not somebody who was an out atheist anyways. So it was a really strange experience. It was very, very unique. But when I came into the community, I don't know. I think that's what saved me, is because when I came into the community, what was popular then was clippets of the top 10 Hitch slaps, or something like that. And I fell in love with Christopher Hitchens. My cat is sleeping in the other room. His name is Hitchens.
I did not know that about you.
Yeah. I got a question from the chat. Richard Madsen, whom I know, and he's a theist, he asks, and I hope I get this right, I'm not sure, he worded it kind of funny. Do you guys know how you will coach a new Christian on argumentation? Or could you coach a new Christian on argumentation?
Yeah.
I could. I'm not sure I'd necessarily volunteer to. Well, that's not true, actually. I have on occasion. I actually steal really bad Christian argument. I steel man them just because it's like, here, dude, you need some weapons.
I would actually do it, because I think exposing them to that early before they get too entrenched into their religion, I think that would be very beneficial.
Well, I think definitely with some argumentation. Like there's some arguments out there where, like I've described it before, as like the bumper sticker philosophy. People catch the buzzwords, like the things that you're supposed to say, like, oh yeah, you can't account for logic or the tools of intelligibility without a God, and like argument over. Like they've done it. But like, if you actually get into a conversation with somebody and you start off from the very foundation, and you start building them up with if they want to get into something like epistemology like that, where you start them building them up from the ground floor, and then by the time they get to that stage where they start talking about things like tools of intelligibility, they realize that, oh wait, this doesn't make sense in light of all the other stuff that I now know.
By the way, Shannon, Richard Madsen would like to have a discussion with you sometime, he says.
I think she may be AFK. I had misunderstood the question, but I for the most part, I try to be very, very cautious about theists that I would actively seek out to engage. I mean, unless I'm saying, look, you want to have a debate, I don't do that. If they're already engaged, with somebody else or with me, I'll engage them. Or if they want to engage me, I'll engage them. But I try to be very careful of, what, I want people to respect me and my boundaries. So I try not to go after Christians who aren't interested in having the discussion. Again, a la Christopher Hitchens, who said, if they keep it to themselves, I will go after them if they start trying to legislate it, or if they start trying to, I'll go after them. But short of that, if it's just somebody I meet on the street or in Facebook or anything like that, I stay away. Let them live their lives.
I have a question for the panel.
Am I the only one left? No, it's me and Jim.
I have a question for the panel.
This is my last beer, okay?
Oh boy.
No, I'm still here.
Am I muted?
No, just one second.
No, you're here. We're just ignoring you, John.
I was trying to play with my camera, so I
What's
just
that?
put floating mustache.
I'm sorry. What? I'm sorry. I hear an inferior mustache.
All right, John. What's the question for the live chat, or from the for the panel from the chat that is live?
No, this is a question for me. Like, what advice do you have for a newbie like me as far as arguing counter apologetics?
Find something that you can't just jump into it. Like everybody has their own experiences here, and actually I think we kind of covered mine. Like mine was, when we start off with these conversations, and I felt like I was being lied to. I was being hit over the head, bludgeoned to death with bad philosophy, and that a lot of my discussion style came from that. I mean, Jim obviously came with a background within scripture from because you were working towards being a minister, right, or something along that line.
I was a pastor.
Yeah, he was a minister.
So you obviously had that already, this deep entrenched knowledge of the Bible. So to turn it around into biblical criticism is the way that you approach it. That was pretty easy for you as well. I'm not sure where Nick came from with his. Shannon kind of went into it as well there, but I think that like when you do want to start getting to the idea that with counter apologetics is to find something that you're passionate about in regard to the conversation and just approach from there.
Oh God, it really, and I mean, it pains me to say this, and I've had to say this more than once on a live stream with people recording it. I agree with Socka. I know it's really been happening far more than I like to admit.
This is becoming an issue, Nick. We need to talk.
I know. Next thing you know, well, okay, I'm not going to take the joke there. That's a long inside joke. But so I'll apply it slightly differently, but I'm just rephrasing it and taking credit for what he said.
From what I hear, it's not that long of an inside joke.
Oh my God!
Oh Jesus! Shots fired! Shots fired! Wow. Okay. Oh boy.
Sorry, that was too easy. It was way
you're the only girl with the mustache party.
You just dropped it.
I know.
That's the sound of a jealous mustache right there. That is the sound of a jealous mustache.
Oh, I think the two of you need to get a room and settle this.
My horse has a better mustache than both.
How about some crunchy peanut butter makeout?
Jim's been in the military, right? I really would be very careful with comparing your horse to. Okay.
Oh, I'm a teddy bear, Nick. I wouldn't hurt a fly.
I know. So my advice, I think, would be find what you know and what you love, because the other thing is too, when you start to, you're gonna get overwhelmed. You're gonna get people who for one reason or another know this better. Sometimes the right argument loses. I mean, it happens. There are gonna be people who are gonna spank you around with it. And if you are arguing from stuff that you know and are comfortable with, when you start to fall back onto that, at least you'll have stuff you're familiar with. And if you build everything up from that, you're always going to be far more comfortable, and just try to keep your discussions into what you know and what you're good at. And just that you can do any level of counter apologetics on just about any. I mean, if you take a look at the Four Horsemen, they're each actually very different and approach it very, very differently, and yet they're all at this really, really high level. So it's what are you good at? Why is it important to you? Start there, and that will make your life a lot easier, and you'll have something to work with.
Since this is kind of intellectual and I'm in a good mood, can I tell a smart joke?
A smart joke?
Yeah.
Better be.
I don't know if you can, but you can certainly try.
Okay, so there's this physicist, and he's walking down the road, down the sidewalk rather, and there's a 7-story building across the street from him, and it's residential, and there's a man on the 7th story outside of his window about to jump, and he's just clinging to the side of the building. And the physicist assesses real quick and makes some quick estimations and calculates some things. And he says, Don't do it. You have so much potential.
Oh God. Oh God. Am I? Did that pause, or was I the only one who? Oh,
No,
God.
that was good. Okay,
I don't get it. I think it's dumb.
Yeah,
Potential energy. It's well. It's
I understand that, but why does the seventh floor matter? Whatever, it's fine.
Well, I did say he was going to jump, not fall.
So I got a question from the chat
oh,
here. And this has I think this has to do also with just like the state of the discussion nowadays, because I have noticed this with some of the theists I've talked to. Is Tyler wants to know, can we talk about the ethics of, or actually, you know, it happens on both sides really. The labeling of dissenting views to dismiss them, specifically when deleting factual critical comments and labeling the commenters trolls. And you see this with theists a lot of times when you try to really hold their feet to the fire with some of the things that they've said. I've done this with Skyle personally, and you also get this with atheists when they're not in a position to answer some questions as well. I remember that there was a guy who, I'm trying to remember what it was. It was in regards to the Kalam, I think it was, and he kept on saying that it wasn't a sound argument. You know, it wasn't a sound. The Kalam, it was stupid. Like everything was wrong with it. And whenever the theists would push back and be like, "Well, can you try to explain this?" And they're like, "No, I heard it was this way," and then they just end up blocking the guy. So, like, I think that you have to have a certain mentality when approaching these discussions. If you can't have your views challenged, I don't even know where to go with the conversation at that point in time.
If you're gonna, I'm so sorry, Socka. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh no, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. It's difficult not to react emotionally to people inundating you by telling you that you're wrong. So when I went into this, I wanted to be challenged. So I gave myself like a little policy. So I've never blocked a soul on Twitter, ever. Not one. I have 0 blocks human people on Twitter. And I've never deleted a comment unless it was somebody making an overtly racist or bigoted remark that was directed at somebody. If it's directed at me, it stays no matter what. No matter what, 100% of the time. So every shitty thing that anybody's ever said to me, every time anybody's ever called me a C word, that's all they are.
Shannon.
Caucasian?
I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I mean, like, you come to my channel here. I've appointed another 20 new mods tonight that because on my channel, everybody gets a wrench here because everybody's special. So,
that becomes more difficult when you get to a higher count too, right? Like it's a moderation.
If I had 1,000 live viewers, that would be a lot more difficult.
Right. And not because you have to give your moderators, all 787 of your moderators, you have to give them specific instructions, because it will get to the point that you'll have somebody on and they'll be making very directed, racist comments, for example. Those don't fly for me. So I put in the words that you can't say, like I type out the words you can't say, that'll automatically put you off. But the rule of my channel is everything that's about the ideas is open for discussion, no matter how agitated you get. But as soon as you make a targeted attack against a person in a live chat, that comment's going to be hidden. Like everything stays. But everything about me, all of that stays regardless.
I would say, I was just going to say, I would say, Shannon, that your policy's in the minority, though. Like, there's a lot more people out there, like what Socka described.
Well, and I have to imagine it takes a psychological toll on you. Those sticking around. I mean, I do my best to follow a similar policy. I'm probably about 98% there, but I don't think I'm and I tend to block more atheists than theists. I get a lot more trouble from them, which is, again, it's the humanist atheist thing. But I'm impressed. I've only met a very handful of people who actually follow that policy, and I'm impressed.
I think that's my problem. Like the way that I approach it is that, like my live chat is people that are here for the discussion, or people that are here to troll, and either way, it doesn't really matter. Like I've had hangouts before. Like actually, I only keep them up for about a week, 2 weeks, and then I take them down. But I do these bring your own topic stuff. So there's actually like probably about 30 hidden videos on this channel, which are just just these open hangouts, it just because nobody watches them afterwards, and they just clutter up the videos that I do have. So I generally take those ones out. But anyway, like the same policy. I give everybody a wrench. People do whatever they want. And there's been some absolutely just reprehensible shit that's been said in my live chat. And when people have to see it, like, so within the situation now, like every single person here is a mod. It doesn't matter if they block somebody or not. They're going to see their comments, and they can't hide anybody. They can't time anybody out. So people just have to deal with it. They either have to ignore them, or they have to engage with that person. Ignore them or engage with them. Like, that's it. The only thing that I might do is put slow mode on if people start doing the like the spamming the several lines things. But I think that it's reflective of our society in a way, how easy it is to block a dissenting opinion. That it's it's like, I don't like what this person's saying anymore. Bam, they're erased, they're gone. And I mean, oh geez, have you guys ever watched Black Mirror?
Yeah, that's an awesome show.
There's one where it's just like that, like the social media stuff is like tied almost like right into their minds, and so like you can look at somebody and pull up their social profile account, and if you block someone, you block them in real life. You can't see them. They just turn into a blur in front of you.
The second most referenced Black Mirror episode, next to the one where you can like somebody. I think that's the first one.
Yeah. And that's terrifying. Could you imagine, like, if you just have a problem with somebody, like, that all you do is block them? Like, so the terrible one with that one was that the guy's ex blocked him, and because his child was a minor and was under the custody of the mother, that his child was blocked from him too. So we didn't even know what his child looked like. It was just a blur that was walking around. And just how easily it is just to, like, with the technology, to just dismiss other opinions. I understand. You know what? People are out there. There's assholes out there that are going to troll you, that are going to call you out, that are going to keep on just pestering you. You just want to just and
they're all going to be anonymous.
And they're all anonymous. Yeah. I just I just don't respond. Or if I choose to respond, I'm going to do it in the most sarcastic, cynical way possible. But there is very little energy that I expel by ignoring somebody, by just like looking at this, like, oh, hey, look, this guy wrote me something stupid. Moving on with my life. And why I have to go through the effort to block somebody or anything, that's fine. They're speaking for themselves, especially if it's someone who's not anonymous. If it's someone who's just created a Socka Count, yeah, it might be a little bit different. But if there's somebody who like, this is their, they have their 500 followers, they have all this other stuff, and they're making themselves look like an idiot, well, who am I to take away their right to make themselves look like an idiot?
No,
I saw perfect.
Well, in fact, I think that if it appears as though they are doing it on purpose and they have a direct path towards it, you have a moral obligation to help them if you can.
I tweet them out. I just tweet captures of them, and I'm like, here, everyone that may not have seen this on the show. That's a comment.
Yeah, if it's clear to you that that's where they want to go, like, give them a boot up. Let them sit on your shoulder.
The guy the other day that wanted to show you his penis. Like,
Yeah.
Like, that's amazing.
Yeah, sure.
Don't block the guy. Fucking just share his stuff out. Here you go.
That is a
If you wanna-
spectacular.
If you want
I did
to,
block him. Okay, so that's Facebook Messenger and
All
Facebook
right.
Messenger, because those are private, not public. I want all my public criticism to remain there. But if you're going to send me your penis on the daily and a bunch of wavy emojis, I can only see so many penises before
You just
I
what you do
need a break.
you take it and you post it back on their wall. You know?
I
Just
don't
like
do that. I know. I don't.
Socka knows what he's doing. Socka knows what he's doing.
I saw-
you paste it back on their wall, like just with a little bit, like you just censor it out enough to get past the Facebook censors, and you say, "Hey, thanks for this, but not interested."
Oh, is that the guy that asked me? There's so many of them. The guy that asked me, "Hey, you heard about foot fetish?" And I was like, "Okay, that's my line."
hey, I wanted to say real quick that I saw a perfect example of what Socka was saying. Like, he'll deal with trolls sometimes sarcastically, because there was this guy under a video that was just trolling. He had posted like 20 or 25 comments, and like half of them, Socka's in there like with some sarcastic, non sequitur comment to what the idiot was saying. It's kind of funny.
I think that,
Yeah.
and in those cases, sarcasm and ridicule actually do work, and they work better than trying to treat them with dignity or respect. That's not going to work. It's the that's the only thing that's going to work. And then a troll sit there and say, okay, this isn't working. I'm not getting a rise out of them. And then they're going to move on. I've only blocked, I don't know exactly how many I've got blocked, four or five, but I think all of them are actually atheists. And it was to what Socka had said earlier, where he lost a friendship because one of the reasons I went from, I consider myself a new atheist. Some people say it's a pejorative. I really like the term, but I usually go by humanist, because otherwise, if I do criticize atheists, I found my friendships got stronger and people got less hurt when I started criticizing atheists. When I said, "Oh, because now it's no longer the same exact tribe, so I'm not being disloyal. I'm not, and people wouldn't question my motives as much as, oh, you're just what is it? You're virtue signaling by showing that you can go against the atheist community." But there have been, and I've encountered a number. It's a very, like I said, 4 or 5, maybe, a number of atheists who, for whatever reason, really, really go out of their way to do the worst of the anti-theist tactics that we've been talking about, specifically to atheists. And it's a very small number of them. They all got small follower counts, so it's not a huge deal. Those ones I do block. I absolutely just block them because I don't have the time. And if I do see them, here's the other thing, which is I have almost a compulsive need to engage. I just do. It's one of those things where I really think every argument can be won. I think if I try hard enough, I can reach everybody, and I can always show them. And it's obviously not even remotely close to true, but I can't shut that off. And so sometimes I have to get that off my timeline, or else I will engage. And it doesn't matter if. And I have to have friends who have to sit there and say, "Nick, have you ever banged your head against a brick wall? Because that's what you're doing now." And it's like, no, trust me, everything's fine. It's like, no, Nick, gonna back the fuck off the ledge. And I especially the ones that really, I block them, and it just makes my life a lot easier. It's a small number, but I do it.
You're speaking to my heart, man, but I haven't got to the stage where I can block them yet. Like, I'm still just, letting them burn out.
Well, probably yours may be a better strategy in the long run. I don't know. It's what I do.
Like, everybody's like, Jim, like, get off your phone. Like, what are you doing? And they're like, are you debating somebody? And I'm like, yeah.
Well, what's that? There's that cartoon, like the guy is sitting in his underwear at the computer, and his wife is like, Jim, come to bed. He's like, I can't, Martha. Someone on the internet is wrong.
I can't, Martha. The Christians are still awake.
Yeah. Well,
me and Paul just go to bed together doing that. We're like, you get him and I'll get him.
That's awesome. Tag team.
Well, and all my friends, and that's one of those. My friends are like, Nick, you've really just got to learn that there are some people who just aren't going to listen, and either get better at ignoring them, which I'm really not all that good at.
Well, anytime
block,
you call things up in the comment section, let me know.
I think that it's like there. So I guess I got kind of a soft spot for trolls. I really do, because I think depending on like what day of the week it is, sometimes the way that I approach people is very troll-like, I guess. It's I don't mind having like good conversations like this, and I don't mind like rolling around in the mud with somebody in an argument. But it's just like I think that the definition of a troll is what the problem is. Like there's people out there that are just out there to gain some type of emotional reaction from you, and I think, well, yeah. I mean, shit. Sometimes that's my goal in serious conversations as well. That emotional response.
What you're saying is that people don't call me a stupid whore because they're trying to compel me to see their perspective. Is that what you're saying? Because it's really a fact.
Yeah, I don't get called a stupid whore that often. I will say, I get called a lot of things, but that's never out there.
I'll wait until after we're done this. Can I comment now? Let's see.
I mean, like hashtag Socka's a stupid whore, guys.
Let's trend that.
Yeah,
I am on board. I am totally on board with that.
But I actually one of my, actually no, not one of my, like, sorry, John, but my favorite Patreon is actually a stupid whore. So I love her though, so it's okay.
Why are you apologizing to me though?
I drink a lot. Maybe I am your patron.
No. She's in the live chat now.
She's funny.
Stupid whore energy. Like her. Used to be Sarah Slap's chat with fish.
I've always liked her. She's funny.
She's funny.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that we're gonna start winding this down now. If anybody has anything else that they want to kind of like close on here over some of the points that we kind of discussed, I think we did a decent job of staying on topic about like 85% of the time. So I'm pretty happy with that.
Actually.
Yeah, that's a higher ratio than most, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's also a very broad topic. So yeah, let's just leave this out there. We'll do the same thing again. Anybody want to plug anything? Any last comments or questions or anything? Just feel free to. We'll start with Jim.
Jim, you're on mute.
You're muted.
You're YouTubing, Jim. Well done. You're on mute.
Or your mustache can't speak over mine.
Uh-oh. Socka, did you mute Jim just for fun?
No, don't
that's
you
why
dare
Socka
go
doesn't.
yet. Okay, I'm here.
That's why Socka doesn't make me a mod, is because I just have Jim on mute and be like,
Okay, I definitely want to plug. I'm not even at 200 subs yet. How many people are watching right now? 50 people watching. That'll get me to 200 subs. Like, just go subscribe. YouTube.com/C/disciple of Kairos, Kairos. I do biblical criticism, debates, some video responses. I'll probably end up doing some live chats in the future. I need some motivation to do some good content, and your subscription will do it. So that's mine. Next.
Nick?
Socka?
I was linking his channel. There you
go. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter, author, writer of all sorts of a variety of different content. I own and operate the Humanist Codex, which is a social networking site. We're still in the beta, but we're a social networking site for atheist humanists, and even, we get polytheists, and we get just any. If you want to be discussing religion honestly, that's go there, hang out. I've got a YouTube channel. It's also just starting out, and if and when I can start putting content on it, great. But sub there, and if I start, most of the time I'm on other people's channels, but that's also been just a great deal of fun. So thank you for having me. It's thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming out and talking this. Sorry, my kids being silly. Yeah, but let's just move on while my kids talking. Shannon.
I'm Shannon, and I have a channel called Shannon Q, and I have just slightly more than 200 subscribers, and I have conversations.
Go jump off a curb.
And I like to fuck with Jim sometimes for fun. And yeah, so I have conversations there. I spend most of my time kind of like Nick roaming around the internet on other people's channels. I just like engaging in conversations. I also do edited, really structured videos about once a month. Where I engage in topics surrounding the psychology of faith and deconversion, as well as conversation strategies. And my conversations tend to be more one-on-one, or a conversation that I'm moderating. And I don't really engage in debates. I do conversations. I don't really do formal debates. So if you haven't seen me before, maybe go check me out, and you can also tell me that I am a stupid whore, and I look forward to it.
Jeez.
Okay, John, I want to thank you for coming as well. And
Is it all right if I say something? Is it all right if I say something?
Absolutely.
Yeah. First of all, I can't believe Shannon's only got 200 subs, but that's
she's been doing this for years. It's really kind of sad, but we all humor her. And somebody's been going onto her channel, and actually every time she looks, it just adds a couple zeros, and then that's what she sees. But the reality is,
Yeah, all I wanted to mention was that I started a new channel. There'll be content on it soon. It's called The Amateur Conversationalist, and thanks to all those people that have already subbed. And Socka said at the beginning he forgot the conversation we had. He did say that he would be on the first episode. It'll be coming sometime this week. If he's not able to do it, we'll come up with somebody else.
Yes,
I'll do it.
Thanks, John. Thanks everybody for coming out there. I like these discussions. I like doing a lot more like open room discussions as well. Just gets more people in, just get some differing opinions, and get some people to challenge me on all the stupid things that I believe. Totally okay with that. That's pretty much what I have, guys. I'm going away next on Monday for about a month. But I will upload some stuff. We're going to have a interview with my production manager in Seattle on next weekend, where he is going to apparently smoke me under the table. So that's going to be a fun hangout.
Tube.
Yeah, that's
that was for Jello.
Yeah, my man Jello shots.
I can be prepared.
If anybody's in the Seattle area next weekend, come by and get completely ripped with me. What else? That's about it.
There's gonna be no people left in Manitoba. What are you gonna do?
I am not in Manitoba anymore. I am now a Vancouver Islander, and we don't speak of my past.
See, I knew there was no people in Manitoba. I was right.
Exactly. All right, and on that note, sub for more fun content, super serious YouTube content. Make sure you subscribe to Socka Count, and have a good night, guys.